Good morning. I'm Brad Green. I'm an engineering director at Google, and I manage the Angular team. Thank you so much for coming. As I like to do, we're going to start off. Oh, let me click on my thing here. Hold on. Sorry, technology. There we go. I have to thank all of you in the community for being part of this. It's the most exciting thing for us to work on Angular when we get to work with all of you in learning new things and building some amazing applications. When we presented last fall at Angular Connect in London, we had announced that over 1.1 million of you come to our doc site every month. If we fast forward to today, over 1.3 million of you are using. So in the last 6 months, over 200,000 of you have come to the Angular 1 platform. And though it's been in beta all this time, 360,000 of you are using Angular 2 already. And this is an amazing community that's been coming together. Now, we're going to talk a bit about Angular 1 in this conference, but we really are focused on all of the fantastic things that you can do in Angular 2. And so I want to talk a little bit about this journey, because it started right here at the first ng-conf over 2 years ago, where we announced Angular 2, maybe a little early. We were very young back then. We set out on a really big mission, and something that was very different than what we had done for Angular 1. Because if I think about what we were trying to do in Angular 1, it was very much just build a framework that makes things easier to use, reduce the amount of work you have to do in doing testing, data binding, all of these little things. And in Angular 2, we're really increasing the scope quite a bit to build a complete platform. And so we've started with what we did in Angular 1 with dependency injection. But we've made it much simpler and much more capable, because now it actually supports lazy loading, and so you can load just the parts of your application that your users need to view what they want to see. We've also been working with the standards community on adding some bits to the web platform, and JavaScript in particular. We've been working with Yehuda over on the Ember team on this feature called decorators. And decorators is an extension to the JavaScript language that allows you to add metadata to your code. And for us, it gives us a really nice way on Angular to specify dependency injection and really how you create components in Angular 2. We've also been working on a low-level JavaScript feature called zones. And although you might not use it yourself, this is something that lets Angular and other frameworks schedule the painting, the drawing that we do, in a much more efficient way. And so you get performance benefits out of it. But if you're an Angular 1 developer, you can think of zones as the reason you're no longer going to have to call $apply ever again. Getting ahead of myself. We've built on these core components a much improved compiler that's much, much faster, and that allows us to do offline compilation so that we can drop large parts of the framework and make the loading time faster as well. We have a change detector that's over 10 times faster than what we built for Angular 1. And we have a new rendering model that, again, is much faster than what we did in Angular 1 and has an architecture that's pluggable. And so we can render to the DOM, like we've done in the past, but we can also render in other scenarios. Like we can render where there's no browser available in the server side, or we can render to native components on mobile and desktop. On top of this, we're building many of the libraries that you're going to need to put a real-world application together. We're building material design for Angular 2, so you can have a really nice, crafted, responsive application UI. We're starting to invest in mobile, and today we're actually announcing our first mobile toolkit. We'll show some of that today. We've also been working with some folks in the community on Angular Universal, which allows you to run Angular on the server so that you can support search engine optimization, but also really fast first rendering for your users so they can have a really quick experience loading your app, so that you yourself can be productive. We've invested in a bunch of tools. Again, with the community, we've been working on the Angular command line interface that really flattens the work you need to do to start a new application, scaffold test, build components, do production builds, all kinds of stuff. Makes it one command instead of a whole bunch of configuration and file creation. We've been working with Microsoft and some other partners on a set of language services that gives you intelligent code completion and refactoring in any IDE. We'll talk more about that mostly tomorrow. And then we've been working with the team at Wrangle on a Chrome plugin to give you insight into running Angular applications for debugging. If you are already running Angular 1 applications, we've built this tool, this service called ng-upgrade that allows you to seamlessly mix Angular 2's components and services into your existing Angular 1 applications. And then some of the APIs we're building for Angular 2, we've built in a way so that you can use them in existing Angular 1 applications. This includes the router, animation, ITN, and so that it can be a really easy transition from Angular 1 to Angular 2. So largely, we've built all the things that we set out to do. And if you've been following along, we've moved from the beta phase to our release candidates, and we're very happy about this. And so what this means is we're now at the place where we think, we've almost got it. Let's see if we've got it. We don't quite have it. But I will explain the gaps that we have. And so these are our attempts at final. So we're very, very close. So in the beta period, we actually developed a bunch of applications inside Google and with partners, with you guys, you folks outside. And during that time, we actually did some surveys to figure out what are our gaps and what do we need to really solve before we can mark this as final. And so we worked with Jeff Welpley and some of the other Google developer experts in the Angular community. Some of the things you guys said were you really wanted to make sure performance was going to be rock solid across the board, that you could rely on Angular for anything that you were going to use. That you had a really good productivity story, that you could build applications quickly and easily, maintain them, and scale them to big teams. And that Angular was going to be versatile enough to work on all the platforms that you need to deliver and work with many different roles in your organization. So on to performance. We have talked about this a couple times in the past, but our goal is that we want it to be small and fast in all scenarios. So you should never have to worry, is Angular 2 the tool that I should use? Yes, it is the tool that I should use. So on rendering speed, we had previously announced in the beta period that we had already been 2.5 times faster on initial render than Angular 1. And in re-render, if the browser has already seen that view before, it was 4.2 times faster. And this was good, but it kind of bothered us that these numbers were different. And it bothered one of our clients inside Google. AdWords said, oh yeah, that's very nice, but maybe faster would be nicer. And so we went back and we did a bunch of research on techniques for improving that cold start rendering speed. And the technique we settled on was this code generation of the compiler. And so now, across the board, we have about 5 times faster than Angular 1 rendering. Very happy about this. The way this works is instead of shipping those HTML templates to the browser to be interpreted over there, we have an offline compile step that instead of shipping those templates, we just generate fully optimized JavaScript. What you would have written by hand if you were very good at building optimized JavaScript. So you get the benefits of handwritten JavaScript with all the really nice features of having a framework. This solved another problem for us, or it will solve, because this is the one thing that's not quite there for us. Where in Angular 2, if you've been shipping applications, you may have seen that it's kind of big. On the order of like about 170K for the library. And when we compare this to the rather svelte Angular 1 at about 56K, you're like, well, what's going on, guys? Why so big? In the builds we have that we're going to be demoing today, we're now at 45K. Actually smaller than Angular 1. And we're not going to stop there. We have some plans and goals to get dramatically smaller than this. We'll talk about that more tomorrow. Not only do we want to be smaller, but we want to make it possible for you to only deliver the minimal amount of code to your users so they can load that very quickly and render it almost immediately. This is possible during the beta period through lazy loading that you manage yourself. But this can be kind of a task. It's an extra bit of overhead for you as developers. We wanted to help with this. And so we came across a technique based on the router that splits this up, because the route really declares all of the modules you're going to need to render a given route. And so we can go pull those for a particular route. So when the user requests the first route, we just load the modules, the code that's required for that. When they request the second route, we just load that bit. So a user can have a very fast loading experience. We've also been, as I mentioned, working with some external partners on Angular Universal, which allows us to do server-side pre-rendering. And the way this works is when a user makes a request, Angular running on the server actually does a full rendering of what it would have done on the client side and sends that back in just HTML and CSS. So it's very small compared to your full application, and it can render almost instantaneously once it gets to the browser. And this is great for mobile, in particular on 2G where they don't have much bandwidth. At the same time as that first payload comes down and the user sees your application, we start streaming down the full JavaScript for running the live application. You can also include an optional pre-boot script that will record any user action, any user events that the user might have done while waiting for the download, so that they can be replayed to your application and the user never loses any of their intentions. This Angular Universal is available now in Node.js and on ASP.NET. And we'll talk tomorrow about some of the other folks that we're working on, so you can have this available in many, many different types of servers. In terms of responsiveness in your application, this is kind of a general problem of just JavaScript apps in general, in that JavaScript is single-threaded. And there has been a technique for moving some of that work off the main UI thread so that users don't see pauses or stutters, called web workers. But almost nobody uses it because it's really hard to figure out. And it's hard because once you move your code into a web worker, you no longer have access to the DOM. And it's a little bit unclear how you would build the bridge between them. On Angular, we've built a way to move all of your code and most of Angular into a web worker just by changing the one line of bootstrap configuration. And so you get the ability to do even more work than you were doing today in data processing, garbage collection, whatever your app needs to do, and not have to worry about it slowing down the user experience. On to productivity. I had mentioned that we've been working with the Wrangle team for quite some time. We used to call this Batarrangle, but as it came along, it's going to be kind of a long name, and the Wrangle team decided Augury would be nice for this. And so we've rebranded as Angular Augury. You can find it at augury.angular.io. This is a Chrome Developer Tool plugin that gives you insight into your live running applications. And so if you've got an application, maybe that looks something like this, you can open the Chrome DevTools and immediately see your component tree with all of its attributes. You can inspect its inputs, outputs, the children, and modify its state, watch as its state gets modified in your application so you can understand how the data binding is hooked up. Additionally, they have very nice visualizations for the injectors and the routing, so you can, again, really understand the architecture of your application, whether it's just a big app you work on, or maybe you're very new to this application, dropping into it for the first time. As Angular 1 grew, it kind of grew organically. And so in Angular 2, we really wanted to focus on simplicity of the whole system. And as one example, in Angular 1, there's something like 43 or so different directives that you just kind of need to learn to know how to use Angular 1. These are things like ng-show and ng-hide and ng-cloak and all of the event-based ones. And in Angular 2, you can just forget about them. You don't have to remember them anymore, because there's two simple pieces of syntax you learn to do data binding to properties, we use square brackets, and to do binding to events, we just use parentheses. And they replace the functionality of all of those 43 directives, which is great for me as a developer, but I think it's even better. So I might think of my productivity as an individual developer, but I'm probably one of many. where I have to collaborate. And there it's important that we've got sort of standardized idioms, that we know what to expect, how people are going to create components, how the architect services, how all of these things fit together. I probably, if I'm very successful, I have a large team with multiple roles, where I may have designers, I may have test specialists, release engineers, who all would like to know what to expect when they come look at the code. And so beyond the APIs in the core system, we wanted to have a style guide that came out with Angular when it launched. And so, unlike Angular 1, which, thanks to John Papa, we have a very nice style guide, but it came years later. In Angular 2, we've launched this just last night. You can go to angular.io/style guide, and it gives you really explicit guidance on the architecture for building your Angular 2 applications, and the reasoning behind why you would or would not choose to pick up this piece of the style. Now, if you're using TypeScript, we can actually do one step better. There's this guy, Minko Getchev, who's built a tool called Codalyzer. And Codalyzer actually does static analysis on your code and matches it against the style guide to tell you if you're on the right track or not. So as you're developing, we can actually give you architectural feedback on your application. It's pretty cool. On to the CLI. Again, this has been a big collaboration with folks in the community. The CLI represents automation for all of those manual, grungy tasks that we wish we didn't have to do. I wish I could just focus on building an awesome application, and that's what the CLI represents. And so if you're building a normal application, you probably do a workflow something like this. I'm going to create my project directory, generate some components. I want to start up a dev server so I can see it. I'm going to generate some routes. I want the code to look nice, so I'll run a linter and a formatter, scaffold my tests and run them. I want to do some pre-processing using Sass or Less or Compass, and then I'll do an optimized build for deployment and finally deploy it. And the folks working on the CLI have actually built commands that simplify all of these things. And just to give you an example of how simple it can be, previously on Angular 2, to start a project, you would create a project directory, write a whole bunch of config files for your tools, install the packages, those tools that use the configs. You'd write a whole bunch of files to build your start of your Angular application, and then hit start. With the CLI, it looks like this. Say, new awesome app, and you start it. Pretty good. All right, on to versatility. So we made a bunch of architectural decisions in Angular 2 so that we were not tightly coupled to the DOM. And we love the web platform. Though there are many places we would like to take the web platform that we can't if we're tightly coupled to it. And so we're investing first in mobile development. And today we're announcing the launch of our mobile toolkit on Angular. You can get to it at mobile.angular.io, and you can listen to Jeff and Alex talking about it later today. And in particular, we're interested in supporting this type of new mobile application called progressive web apps, where it's a web app, but that becomes progressively more like an installed app as you use it. And the reason we want to support this is because most developers find it's really hard to get people to find their app in the App Store or the Play Store and install it. There's just a lot of friction to get that happen. But they are being successful getting people to surf to their website. And so the experience for users is something like this. They surf to your website on their phone, just like they always do. But in the background, your app gets auto-installed for them so that it's there when they come back. And they get an option to install your icon to their home screen on their device. Behind the scenes, we're taking advantage of some new web platform features. We're using service workers to automatically cache your data and application code. And then through server-side push, we can actually push down new versions of that code and data so that it's ready for the user, just like native applications do. And so that it's also there if the user has intermittent connectivity or just happens to be offline, they can still have a great experience with your application. We're supporting this particularly with Angular Universal, so they can have a really fast first render experience, which is particularly critical on mobile, on 2G. So that they can have a really responsive experience, we can use web workers, and then bringing it all together, so all of these pieces of architecture get a starter kit for you. We can pull it together with the CLI. Once you are successful attracting users to your platform, you probably will want an installable app that they can use. And you've got a couple examples here. We've actually been working with the Ionic team longer than almost any other partner that we've got. Actually, at the beginning of Angular 2, 2 years ago here, we started working with them on building that next generation of Angular to make sure it worked well with Ionic. And the way Ionic works is you work with web views, and you can actually have a very nice transition using Ionic to build your progressive web apps, and then using that same code on the installed mobile version. And what Ionic does is they give you a way to build UIs that look native on iOS, Android, and Windows, but use web views like you're used to on the web. But they also give you access to all the native features you're going to want, like the camera, accelerometer, GPS. More recently, we've been working with the team at NativeScript. And what NativeScript does is they give us another renderer that actually uses the native UI elements on Android, iOS, and Windows, so that you can build in JavaScript using all of the Angular constructs that you're used to, but having a fully native UI. Similarly, we had started a project with the Facebook folks on React Native. We kind of dropped the ball, but luckily, some of our partners at Amadeus picked up the work that we've done and pulled it over the finish line. And you can hear talks from all of these folks at the conference, and there's some pretty cool stuff. Desktop is new for us, and there's a couple different ways you can get to desktop. We've got starter kits for both Windows Universal and Electron, and I'm going to walk you through the Electron case because it's pretty similar in both scenarios. So what Electron does is they give you the shell, and Electron's it's a toolkit from GitHub. If you've used something like Slack on the desktop or VS Code, you've already been using an Electron app. What they do is they give you a pair of Chrome to do rendering and Node to do processing, coupled in a package. And so you can develop using HTML and JavaScript. You get installers for Windows, Mac, and Linux with auto upgraders and all the nice pieces that you would like. And you get native menus and notifications to make it feel like a real desktop application. If we look at this diagram, though, it looks suspiciously like my web workers diagram, and we can perform that same trick here, where we move Angular into the Node.js process. This has that same effect as we do on mobile, where it's faster, snappier, more responsive. But I think more powerful than that is that you get direct access to all of the platform APIs. You can call on the authentication model for your OS, the database, hardware, whatever you want directly without ever having to go over HTTP right within your service in an Angular application. The last big thing that folks had asked us for is that they wanted a really nice, rich suite of UI elements that they could rely on without having to write them themselves. And the thing that they called out most often was Angular Material. And so yes, we're building this for Angular 2. But Material is not the only game in town. And so we wanted to bring our friends along with us. And so we're building Material 2 in a way that we can actually share not just some of the techniques, but also architecture, the core bits of infrastructure with our partners. And so we have the start of Material 2. The folks at Wijmo have already released a rich suite of components that you can use already. From the world of Java, the Prime folks have released PrimeNG for Angular 2. If you're building an application for Salesforce, you can use ng-Lightning for a Lightning-themed component suite. Vaadin has created a set of web components that will work with Angular 2 today. They're also rewriting this as natively implemented Angular 2 components so that they can take advantage of web workers and server-side rendering with Universal. Telerik has said that they're going to rewrite the Kendo UI. This is in progress. And you've got a couple options for Bootstrap. ng-Bootstrap is one example over there. I've probably missed a couple. We'll get you guys in our resources page pretty soon. All right. I'd now like to invite Jules Kremer on stage. Jules is in charge of our developer relations group on the Angular team, and she's going to tell us about some of the great things we've done with partners.
Thanks. I'm Jules, and And I've actually been with Google for a while. I started off helping companies big and small make a transition from traditional IT systems into the cloud. And while I was doing that, I noticed that developer needs were also in transition. And as someone who's always cared about developer problems and solving them, I set out to see if there was something that Google could do. And so last year, I was actually here at ng-conf. I didn't know anyone on the Angular team, not Igor, not Brad, not Naomi, no one. They didn't know me. I actually won the ticket in an internal lottery. My eternal gratitude to Igor for picking me. I packed my bags, I left out all of my Google gear, and I showed up here in stealth mode. It's actually a thing. And why would I do that? Well, I did that because I wanted to sit out there with all of you. I wanted to walk in the hallways. I wanted to hear what people were saying and sort of catch the vibe without the Google badge attached to my belt. And so last year I heard that you guys need more avenues for learning Angular. I heard that you need sample code that's based in real-world scenarios, bigger reference apps. I heard that big companies have some very specific needs that we needed to address. Mostly I saw the power of open source, of this community, and a super deep love and respect for the Angular engineering team. In fact, that was the first line of my ng-conf 2015 trip report. A couple months later, I found myself in a Google conference room, pitching the need to solve these developer problems to that guy, Brad Green, whom I didn't know. He brought along Naomi, and after I walked them through some of the ideas I had, they said, why don't you come join us and do it here? And a few short weeks later, I was on the Angular team getting to work. I never imagined last year that I would be standing here at this keynote with you today. So since then, I've had the opportunity to talk to so many of you, all of our wonderful Angular GDEs, and so many partners in our ecosystem. And I've been actually pretty successful in taking your feedback and influencing product direction, how we write our content, how we write our social media, and I hope you've all noticed that. And along the way, I've had the opportunity to meet all kinds of developers. When I was first learning about observables, I had the very good fortune to be introduced to Rob Wormold. Not only does he make streams look really easy, and they're not, but I knew instantly that he was an Angular 2 expert that could help make all of us as developers way more successful. And so I was thrilled when Google allowed me to bring him to Google as our first Angular developer advocate. While I was going through that process, out of the blue, a recruiter sent me the resume of Stephen Fluen. I met Stephen, and after the first meeting, I knew that his background with Angular and his ability to relate to developers was second to none. And so with Stephen, Rob, and myself, we now have an Angular developer advocacy team. And a huge shout out to David East, who's actually the Angular Firebase developer advocate as well. Our job and our team is here to make all of you guys successful, and via your success, see Angular grow, and I'm super looking forward to what we're going to be able to accomplish this year. But last year when I was here and when I joined the Angular team, I was new to open source. I had never seen the power of it, and I've been blown away by what happens when you can bring so many people together working on disparate problems. As Brad mentioned, the CLI was largely written by you guys, with just a couple of core team members involved. The style guide Brad also mentioned, while we had input as a team, it was Minko, John, Jesus, and largely Ward who contributed to that and made it actually happen. Another great example is the work we did with the Drupal team, a couple of Angular contributors and guidance from Igor to get Twig templates to work in Angular 2. If you happen to be going to DrupalCon, Stephen will be doing a session on that project actually there. And as always, our partnership with Amadeus continues to grow and be a shining example of the value large companies can get by contributing back to an open source framework. Their work on Angular 2 and React Native was really helpful, and I hope you'll all help us make it even better. So there's a lot of people and companies making Angular great. We work closely with Microsoft, as you know. It's not just about products either, like VS Code and .NET and of course TypeScript. But we get to do fun things, like our Angular engineers get to check in code to their repos. And for me personally, I got to share a stage with Anders, which was a shining moment in my career at Microsoft Connect this year. And even cooler, I got to go to the MVP Summit as an ex-softie with a Google badge on and actually present in Redmond. That was pretty awesome. And as Brad mentioned, there's been a lot of people, like the folks at Grape City who built Widgmo UI, and our friends at Meteor who work on data problems, and and a host of other people who provided feedback during the Angular 2 development cycle. And that's literally just to name a couple. There are so many people out there doing so many great things to make Angular awesome that I couldn't possibly stand up here and recognize all of you or create a logo slide that was at all adequate. So know that we know you're out there. You guys are doing amazing things. Thank you. Brad also referred to this resources page. So one of the questions I was getting asked all the time when I would come out and talk to everybody in the community was, how do I find all the great things that work with Angular? So today you can go to angular.io/resources and find all of those great things our community has built. If we forgot your favorite library, this is definitely a growing and immature list. Please use the link at the top and send it to us. So enough about Angular for now. I'd like to invite some people onto stage to tell you about their successes and trials with Angular. So to start us off, I'd like to invite the Kiva team to stage to tell us about a project we've been collaborating on to help solve world poverty.
Thanks, Jules. Hi, I'm Kevin O'Brien, CTO at Kiva.org, here with Rangel and Telerik. And I want to tell you guys about how we're embracing Angular 2, but also about our mission of connecting people through lending to alleviate poverty. And that started in East Africa with our founders, Matt and Jessica, lending to 7 people who were disconnected from the rest of the world, no access to finance. Their only opportunity to grow their business, a loan shark, you could say the turning to the dark side of capitalism. And instead, they got this opportunity through crowdfunding to grow their business. A woman, Elizabeth, a fishmonger, she got a $500 loan. She was able to grow her storefront, increase her income, and pay back her loan, and then had enough income from that that she could send her 7 kids to school to get an education. And so that connection that they built has been something they wanted to spread across the world, and we have, but we needed technology to help us do that. And so from there, we've connected millions of lenders to millions of borrowers, 80+ countries, from rural Uganda to here, photo booth rental business in Bountiful, Utah. And it's all about showing people that even if they're excluded from the finance system, that there's an opportunity for them in the world to get connected to people like you who will crowdfund their loans as little as $25 at a time, and show that you believe in them. That's the spirit of Kiva, is the human connection, connecting to your fellow human beings, showing them that the heart is there, that you believe in their business, and they can show you that through that belief, they can prove that they can grow their business, pay their loans back, and show the world that we can make a better place. But the technology behind that is often not simple. You can imagine sending money around the world is complex at times. That's where Rangel has helped us. They have built our first mobile app to connect lenders to borrowers right here at home in the US, your city, your town, local loans near you. And you can now spark a connection that otherwise might not have ever happened, and you can change the world. And with that, I turn it over to Rangel to show how they did it.
Hi, my name is Nick Van Wittenberg. I'm the CEO of Wrangle.io, and I'm extremely excited to be here. We're a JavaScript-only design and development shop. We've been working with Angular. That was sort of our founding sort of reason to become a company. And to be able to work with a company like Kiva on an app like this and to work with Telerik has been a really exciting experience. We only really got everything organized about 4 weeks ago. So we only had about 3.5 weeks to build this app. And we put together a team, Adam Rafiq, Owen Mullings, and Pamela Charbois, and they collaborated with the Kiva team, and they got the big picture, they understood what the goals were, and then we went into a lean agile delivery model where we quickly built the first version of the app in about a week, and then we just iterated on that till everyone was happy, and we had the working app that proved out what sort of Kiva needed to do with their mobile app strategy. And it was a great experience. Let's see if I got this right. So things went really, really well. It was an awesome experience, except for the slide. So this app has 60 frames per second scrolling. It's written in JavaScript. It's cross-platform. It runs on iOS and Android, and we have 60 frames per second scrolling. That's really exciting. It has native transitions, so when you go through the app, when you scroll and when you click on something, and when you bring up the menu, it's native transitions on both iOS and Android. It has awesome native components, and it has a single code base. So we were able to build it, we put in a list view, and it worked as expected. And that's what gives the 60 frames per second in the native transitions. We use CSS to lay everything out. So when you're building cross-platform, to be able to use something like CSS, that's amazing. And it worked flawlessly with native components. I'm good with JavaScript, not slides. There we go. It uses a standard web development workflow. I mean, this is really exciting if you've ever built native apps. It's a little bit painful, but we had auto reload for both iOS and Android at the same time from a single code base. So our developers and designers could look at both simultaneously. And finally, we delivered simultaneously for iOS and Android. And so every time we did a build that we wanted feedback on, we could push it out to everybody on iOS and Android. It wasn't like we built it on one and then we tried to catch up and get the other. We did both at the same time. So all in all, it was an amazing experience. We built the app in about 3.5 weeks. We helped Kiva validate their mobile strategy. We're going to be working with Kiva in the future on their mobile apps. And we're going to open source this. So Wrangle is going to open source it, and it'll be there for people who want to look at how to use native script or who want to look at how to use Kiva's open API. And with that, I will pass it over.
Thanks, Nick. Let's steal that. It was so exciting to watch Wrangle and Kiva work together on building that mobile app with NativeScript. It was really cool stuff. Hi, everybody. My name is Burke, and I work with the NativeScript project at Telerik. If you're not familiar with NativeScript, it is an open source framework for building cross-platform native mobile applications with JavaScript, CSS, and markup. These applications are 100% native. That means all of your UI components are native. All of your code is a first-class citizen on the GPU, and that means there is never any jank, even on Aaron's 6-year-old Android phone with a physical keyboard. You got to upgrade that thing, buddy. That sucker's old. About a year ago, I got, what's with this clicker? Do I have to be close? Oh, there we go. So about a year ago, I got this email, which, by the way, Brad, is it okay if I show this email? Okay. So I got this email from Brad asking us if he thought, or if we thought that NativeScript and Angular would be good together. And we looked at Angular 2, and because Angular 2 was smart enough to remove the dependency on the renderer, they're actually great together. And so we are so excited today to announce that after a year of working on this, because Angular 2 changed just a little bit over last year. Thanks for that, guys. Thank you so much. We're announcing today NativeScript 2.0 with full support for Angular 2. Angular, yes. We're so excited about this. It's been a long time coming. We wanted to release it many times before, but we wanted to get it right. All of your Angular 2 code is now a first-class integration inside of NativeScript. All of your services, all your pipes, all your component logic, all your template and binding expressions, all of that stuff now works inside of NativeScript. Now, we've been fortunate enough to work with some awesome companies right out of the gate, including Fidelity. You can see a NativeScript version of their app here, who are doing some amazing things with Angular 2 already. And Travell is actually here today. Maybe he'll come by the booth and he can talk about some more of what they're doing there. Really cool stuff. So in honor and celebration of all this, we've set up this nifty site for you guys to go to where you can get started. And if you're in the audience and you're like, I know Angular 1, but I don't know Angular 2, and I think I'm the only one, trust me, you're not. Look to your right, look to your left. Those people don't know it either. So if you don't know it, if you don't know it, it's fine. We've got a guide that will walk you through building your first native, truly native mobile application, and it will teach you Angular 2 along the way as well. Everybody should have gotten one of these shirts when you came in today. We've never given away a shirt to everybody at a conference before, but this is a big deal for us. And if you're watching on the live stream, you also have an opportunity to get one of these shirts as well at that site. And then lastly, here's what I want everybody to do. I want you to go home, and next week I want you to watch Living on a Dollar on Netflix. Has anybody seen that documentary? It's excellent. I want you to watch it. Then I want you to go to kiva.org, and I want you to make a loan, and I want you to change somebody's economic future forever. Because all this technology that we do, that we work on, Kiva is actually using it to change the world. And that to us is incredibly exciting. Thank you so much.
So now I'd like to invite our friends at the Weather Channel to stage. I mentioned that we did some work with the Drupal team. So the Weather Channel has some unique challenges with the way they build weather.com and their affiliated websites. So they're here to tell you about some unique ways they've also interacted with our team. Here you go.
Hello, my name is Matt Davis, and I'm a lead Drupal architect for a company called MediaCurrent. I'm joined today on the stage by Jeff Liu from the Weather Company, with whom I've been collaborating for the last several months on our first Angular 2 project. I'm also here today as a longtime member of the Drupal community. For those of you who may not know, Drupal is a PHP-based content management framework that's been around for more than 15 years, has an active developer community of over 100,000 people, and is used by large enterprise sites as well as small mom-and-pop shops. Even Kiva, who we just heard from, uses Drupal. As a back-end framework with powerful RESTful capabilities out of the box, it's a great choice for specific use cases, like sites requiring complex data models, advanced SEO configurations, or multilingual capabilities. Furthermore, Drupal is actively evaluating the possibility of putting Angular 2 into its core architecture, enabling us to create more compelling back-end interfaces as well. I actually met just last week with the creator of Drupal, Jules is his name, to discuss the efforts at building more bridges, both technical and personal, with the JavaScript and Angular worlds. So I'm excited to be here on the Angular community's turf to explore how we can foster a greater partnership and make Drupal more useful and accessible for your developers. The Angular team has also been very responsive to the Drupal community and has made changes to help our project go well. So Dries had specifically asked me to thank the team for their collaboration with us. So thank you. I've been working on the Drupal side in partnership with the Weather Company for about 2 years now. First, I helped them build their flagship site, weather.com, which uses a combination of Drupal and Angular 1.3. Instead of a fully decoupled backend, we have Drupal serve the page wrapper and the most static pieces of content server-side, and then Angular fills in the pieces of the page client-side that have a lower time to live or need a richer user experience. The presentation framework that we built allows JavaScript developers to write these pieces of Angular functionality without needing to learn any Drupal. Each one is compartmentalized into its own directory that contains all the templates, JavaScript, and CSS assets that it needs, as well as a small JSON formatted file that declares some metadata out to Drupal, which is then processed by Drupal and made available for editorial teams to place on their pages. This framework has served the Weather Company's needs very well. However, when their sister site, Weather Underground, or wonderground.com, began moving on to this same platform, one of the first things we started looking into was using Angular 2 instead. And as we started investigating, we became really excited about some of the ways that Angular 2 is actually a more natural fit for our platform, like being completely component-based and supporting component load on demand. However, we also encountered some unique challenges when we were architecting this out. So here to speak a little bit more about those challenges and how we were able to solve them is Jeff.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Jeff Liu. I'm a software engineer at the Weather Channel, and we are an IBM business. A little background on why we chose Angular and Drupal to be our platform. As a company, we were looking for ways to enable the editorial team, the content creators, and the product owners to be able to quickly and easily modify existing pages, or even create a new pages at moment of notice without having to involve any developers or development work, especially during severe weather events. With the help of our Drupal architect, we were able to integrate Angular components seamlessly into Drupal UI framework. Here's a quick example on how the end users are able to pick and choose any Angular components and drop them into different containers on the page based on page layout. In this example, we have 3 different Angular components in the header container and 1 homepage component in the content row 1 container. When the user saves or updates the page, the finished product will look like this. As you can see, our page consists of many Angular components, and they are scattered throughout the page. The weather channel has been running on this model with Angular 1.3 for about 2 years now. Performance is, for a site like this is very paramount. So we started our journey with an Angular back in January. We began prototyping, architecting, and laying out the foundation for this migration project. Immediately, we ran into a couple of challenges. As I mentioned in the earlier slide, our pages consist of many Angular components. However, those components may be intermingled with other DOM elements that are being rendered server-side by Drupal. So the traditional way of bootstrapping an Angular app wasn't going to work for us. We needed a way to be able to bootstrap just the top-level app as soon as we can, and then dynamically bootstrap components on demand based on viewport or user actions, such as scrolling down the windows. So we did many Google searches, and we couldn't find a way to do what we were trying to do. Then we reached out to Brad and the Angular team, explaining our use case and our requirement, and it turns out there's a way to do what we wanted. It's just a single line of code will do the trick. It's called a long-form bootstrap. Because this was an internal API, therefore, it wasn't documented. And this hasn't been done by anyone outside of the Angular team, as Brad indicated. So with this feature, we were able to dynamically load and bootstrap components as we need them. However, our pages consist of many Angular components and also with multiple instances of the same component type, such as the video component here. So calling app.bootstrap API this way will always bootstrap the first one it finds, and this wasn't going to work for us either. So we needed a way to be able to selectively bootstrap a particular instance of a component. But this functionality didn't seem to be supported by the Bootstrap API. So I filed a ticket and reached out to the Angular team. In a few days, the Angular team came back with a solution for us. By calling the Bootstrap with custom selector and passing the selector class, our problem is solved. And we were able to push forward with our project. And at the moment, we are still exploring different ways to improve page performance. And here are a few things that we are experimenting with to optimize performance. And we are working closely with the Angular team throughout. And I want to thank the Angular team for all their support and their hard work in making Angular 2 an awesome framework. Thank you. And come check out the weather. It's amazing out there. Thank you.
So one of the things that's important, I think, to call out about that presentation is that while we hope to solve all of the world's problems, and we probably can't, in this case, we had an internal API that we had no idea anyone external to Google would actually need to use. So don't be shy when you run into similar scenarios, and hopefully we can help you get along the way too. As I mentioned earlier, my earlier career before the Angular team in Google was actually with our enterprise team, helping a lot of big companies try to imagine how to move all of their workloads to this thing we call the web. One of my favorite partners that I used to highlight to almost every big company is Lucidchart. I'll let them explain their app, but I'm so excited for them to be here. They recently rewrote their entire UI in Angular 2, and they are here to tell you about the castle they built.
Hi, everyone. I'm I'm Ben Diltz, co-founder and CTO at Lucid Software. This is Ryan Stringham, a senior engineer at Lucid Software, and also the lead of our Angular 2 team. For those who aren't aware, Lucid Chart was one of the first major graphical applications launched on the web. And it's all written in handwritten JavaScript, over 500,000 lines of it now. And it has grown over time to be many times larger and more complex than we foresaw it becoming. And what we thought that we had been building over the course of these several years was something like this, where it's reassuring, solid, everyone who sees it immediately loves it and feels happy to be involved. But after spending time with some of our users and watching them use it in the last year, we discovered that what we'd actually built was more like this, where it felt sort of cobbled together. It had grown organically over time. Every new feature that we had built had adoring users, but no user was using all of it, right? And what our users actually wanted was more like this. They wanted a simple, easy way to get their particular job done. And as we considered the scope of the problem in front of us and the amount of effort that would go into rewriting sort of the Chrome around our application, we started looking around for frameworks to see what could help us to build this. We considered several different frameworks, including Angular 1 and Angular 2. And we settled on Angular 2 for a couple of critical reasons, and Ryan is going to walk you through a few of those.
So the first reason was that in Angular 2 we have template code that is easy to read and easy to write. New developers can easily understand what's going on in the view with the declarative syntax. The one-way data binding is expressive, and you can tell what's a string and what's an expression. You also get the benefits of things like pipes, where you can format your data. For example, here we're formatting a date by passing it through to the date pipe. Another advantage we found in Angular 2 is that we can write very simple CSS, because the styles only apply to the components they're written for, thanks to the Shadow DOM emulation. So we don't need to write deep, nested, complicated CSS selectors to style our application. The styles can live right with the components. And at Lucidchart, we've invested in using the Clojure compiler for type safety, dependency management, and dead code removal using ES5. When we tried using Angular 1 with the Clojure compiler, it required us to jump through a lot of hoops, and the compiler had to run an additional special Angular 1 pass with a more magical dependency injection. With Angular 2, it made it easy to incorporate the Clojure compiler when we're writing using ES5, and we can still get the benefits of type safety and dependency management in Angular 2. And finally, with Angular 2, we have testable view components. Previously, with our handwritten JavaScript, it was difficult for us to test our view without writing end-to-end integration tests. So now we have unit tests for all of our Angular 2 components, and we actually have a much higher code coverage with Angular 2 components than the rest of our JavaScript. So now everything but the WebGL canvas is built using Angular 2. We have a little video to show off.
Thank you. That's been a labor of love for us for several months now, and it's just reaching beta. Now, we realized all of the advantages that we had foreseen with moving forward with Angular 2, but there were a few that surprised us, pleasantly surprised us as we moved on with this project. One was that because the view components are so concise and terse in Angular 2, the weight of our UI code was actually dropped substantially. There's at least a 30% drop in the total lines of code in that UI Chrome layer around the Lucidchart application, which is a tremendous benefit to developer efficiency and maintainability and also just code weight. Also, because Angular 2 makes it trivially easy to remove elements from the DOM that are not visible at the time, the DOM that we present to the browser is actually 3 times smaller than it was for the same state of the application with the Angular 2 version of our UI versus our handwritten JavaScript version. There was also one unexpected advantage, particularly over Angular 1. We do have sections of our application written in Angular 1, not there in our core editor experience, but elsewhere. And the change detector can, in fact, start to bog you down as the DOM becomes increasingly complex. And we were worried about that in the early days of development of our Angular 2 version of our editor. But we found that with a simple change to our components where we specify the change detection strategy as on push, we could then use the information that we have easily on hand already about when our model is changing to inform the change detector in Angular 2 which components need to be updated. And this individual change brought our change detection step down from over 8 milliseconds on average down to a small fraction, 1/10 of a millisecond or less, which was a tremendous gain. We actually just posted a blog post about some of the technical specifics about how we underwent that and some of the troubles we ran into on our tech blog if you guys want to check it out. So that's that. If you want to see the new version of the Lucidchart editor, you can always go to lucidchart.com/ng-conf. You will see that. And a tremendous thank you to the Angular team, who I think have done a fantastic job in providing this incredible tool to us.
So you heard Brad talk about Angular Universal, and I'd like to now invite Michi from a company you might recognize to tell you about some early wins they've seen using Angular Universal and Angular 2.
All right, I saw other people had problems with this, so I'm going to stand right here. All right, so my name is Michi. I'm from Capital One. I work on the homepage team. I'm a senior director there, and I'm overseeing the team right now that is re-architecting the homepage of CapitalOne.com, which some of you may recognize. It's quite a heavily trafficked web property, and there's a lot of considerations that have to go into how you might select a technology platform that's specific to the enterprise, especially for us because we're a bank. So the first 2 items, performance and SEO, probably really obvious. There's revenue ramifications to that. Traffic ramifications. Accessibility is a little bit unique to us. You can't really discriminate against blind people from using their money. So that's actually a regulatory issue. And then, of course, the company is actually quite distributed. We've got dozens of offices, even just in this country, but also globally. And so there's some issues there around the types of technologies that you use. So we started with Angular 1 as a point to look at, because obviously there's obvious performance benefits around Angular 1. But there's a problem with it, which is around search engine optimization or the source code. If you look at a typical Angular application, which you can see here, basically you have a bunch of boilerplate, right? When you look at the source code of an Angular app, it doesn't tell you anything about what's on that page. So if you're using an old browser or whatever, you don't even know what's there. And an example of where you might see this in action in real life is if you were to send someone an IM over Slack or something, Slack scrapes that page and sends you a preview, right? So imagine if you send someone an Angular page that has something like this, where the title is an Angular variable, and then you get something like, this is actually a screenshot. The URL has been changed, but I don't want to embarrass anybody. But you can see that the description isn't hydrated, right? It's just a variable. And so this is what a screen reader might see. This is what scrapers see. Maybe some of the search engines out there might see that. And that's a big problem. So what we really wish we can do is serve something like this, where what the browser sees, the end state, as I like to call it, is actually what is in the source code, right? And then Angular or whatever could resume on top of this. And this is what you would look at and see if you looked at the inspector for your browser, right? So this is the ideal situation. There's obvious big ramifications around search engine optimization, for example, because you know with 100% certainty what the search engine scraped, right? So we actually decided to try building this ourselves, right? Trying to get this benefit ourselves. So we started with Angular 1, and what we did is for every page that we wanted to port over to this new framework, we made 2 versions of it. One which was the partial that you might see when you're doing a regular Angular application, the piece that's in the middle, the content, the images, that kind of stuff. And one that's the full page, which is with the header, the footer, the menu, that kind of thing. And then we would serve to the user the bright piece based on the context. So if that person was coming to the homepage or something for the first time, they would be shown the full page, and then when they click around and interact with the application, we would switch out the route, right, via the route transitions. And this isn't necessarily an Angular concept. It could be React or whatever. But of course, there's a big limitation in that this renderer that we built only really dealt with the route, right? It doesn't deal with directives, or if you had a filter on a variable, it doesn't deal with that stuff, right? So it's a big limitation. It's still an improvement, right? You're still getting some benefit, but you're losing a lot of other things. And so, for example, your menu wouldn't get indexed, right? So there's some big problems there. And so we saw this, and this is where Angular 2 comes in, right? And Angular Universal. And we've been working really closely with Patrick from Angular Universal on making this happen. So shout out to him. So what Angular Universal does, it was briefly talked about, it allows the Angular engine sort of to run server side. And so in this example, that same example, you would see it hydrated to the initial view that you might actually want to see in the DOM. And in this case, what we'll do is we'd capture this string, this output, this HTML, and we would upload it to the cloud just like we had in the previous step. So nothing has changed in terms of the flow of the application, but now everything that's there is fully hydrated. All the directives, the filters, the services are running. So that's a really big advantage. And when you look at this from, I hope you can see this text, it's kind of really hard to see actually. On the left, you've got sort of the Angular 1 flow, and what we're showing here is the time to first byte. Then there's like a loading placeholder. It's downloading all the JavaScript code. The framework has to initialize. And finally, the end state is painted, and the user can interact, right? On the right is the Angular 2 universal situation. And what you have there is the HTML is downloaded, and immediately it's painted, right? The user can start interacting with the page. Behind that, the JavaScript code might download, the framework will initialize, and then pre-boot, which we talked about earlier with Brad, that would fire off and would replay all the events that the user may have done up to that point. So you don't have any race conditions, and the application essentially catches up, right? And we're talking about quarter second or something, so it's not a big deal either way, but you don't have actions that are dropped. Finally, there was this point about large distributed teams. It's kind of an enterprise-only situation, but the website has many, many dozens of developers that work on it. And so TypeScript is actually really great, and also Angular 2's model. So when you're using that stuff, your dependencies are local. You're explicit about them. There's no more global dependencies, and you don't step in each other. You've got optional typing, so you don't misuse someone else's functions or code that they wrote or their libraries, right? And of course, compile time checking. And this reduces and removes an entire set of types of errors that you see in production. So all these are really big concerns for us because messing this up affects our business and our brand. And so it's really important that we get this right. So these are really important considerations for us, and I think that TypeScript, much to many people's dismay, I think is a great first step towards getting enterprise to adopt things like Angular. And so, just wanted to conclude with thanking the Angular team, I guess, with Angular 2, and also thanking Patrick on Angular Universal, and we look forward to seeing more developments in this community. Thanks.
So that was all really cool stuff, but we're at the end of our keynote. So I wanted to leave you with this. Shortly after I joined the Angular team, a couple weeks, Brad walked into the office wearing this shirt that said, "You can sit with us." You can see he's wearing it today. He wears this shirt an awful lot. After I saw it a few times, I realized that his shirt really embodies the core value of the Angular team. So whether you're working .NET, PHP, Ember, React, ES5, ES6, or whatever could possibly come next, we hope you'll come sit with us and keep making Angular awesome. Have a great ng-conf.